I was hiking alone in a pretty secluded area near a small town, but it was also known to have a lot of hikers, so it was safe to hike there. On my way to discover the woods, I met a woman and assumed she was another hiker. She looked in her mid-30s, and we exchanged some small talk. She was behaving very strangely, so I took my distance and completed my way, only to notice that she was following me. I didn't want to say anything. I was shy and naive at that time, and didn't want to cause any unnecessary drama. So I just walked another mile or so and set up my camp. The woman did too. She didn't talk or anything, lit some fire, and just sat beside her tent. I thought maybe she was just feeling lonely and wanted some company. But as soon as I tried to talk with her, inviting her to drink a warm cup of tea, she made it clear to me that she didn't want to talk and told me to leave her alone. Feeling kind of embarrassed, I left for my tent and fell asleep. But that didn't last long. I heard something moving around my tent and spotted, in the dim light coming from the campfire, a figure beside my tent. I came outside to see what the hell was going on, only to find the woman standing straight outside my tent with a gun in her hand. Terrified, I asked her what she wanted. She ended up taking everything of value I had, which was not much, just some cash and a camera, and also took all the canned food, finally leaving and disappearing into the dark forest behind us. I spent the night shivering, scared in my tent that she'd come back for me. In the morning, I collected my stuff and sprinted all the way back to the small town I started my hike from. I went to the police, and they showed me a picture of the woman. It turned out she had shot her husband the day after and was on the run. November's chill cut through the woods like a knife as I ventured into the silence of the hiking trail. It was weirdly quiet, way too silent for a popular spot, usually buzzing with hikers. But today, it was just me and the bare trees, their branches clawing at the gray sky. Walking on that narrow trail, I felt a shiver running down my spine. Not just from the cold, though. The solitude, usually my escape, started feeling more like a trap. I questioned my decision to hike alone, but stubbornness kept my feet moving forward. Turning a bend, I saw her. A woman, sitting on a thick branch, wearing a thin, white nightgown. November's bite should have had her freezing, but there she was, locked in some heated debate with herself. I slowed down, wondering if I'd accidentally wandered into a horror movie scene. Her voice, loud and sharp, sliced through the quiet. "No, you can't do this to me. I won't let you." I stood there, frozen for a moment, debating whether to make a run for it. But curiosity got the better of me. I approached, hoping to sneak by unnoticed. Fat chance. She snapped her head in my direction, eyes wide and staring right into my soul. Creepy, right? I tried to mumble a hello or something, but before I could, she burst into laughter, loud and unsettling, echoing through the woods like a bad omen. "What's so funny?" I managed to stammer, regretting every life choice that led me to this moment. She kept laughing, a kind of laughter that made my skin crawl. I sprinted away, her laughter following me like a shadow. Panic set in, and I didn't stop running until I stumbled upon a group of other hikers taking a break in a clearing. Breathless, I spilled the bizarre encounter to the skeptical group. They exchanged doubtful glances, but being the good Samaritans they were, agreed to come with me and check it out. As we retraced my steps, doubt clawed at me. What if she was just a figment of my overactive imagination? When we reached the spot, the tree stood empty, devoid of any woman in a nightgown. The hikers exchanged glances, the skepticism turning into concern. I stood there, feeling like the butt of a joke I wasn't in on. They patted my back and offered words of reassurance, but the damage was done. That lone encounter messed with my head. The woods, once my happy place, became a labyrinth of uncertainty and fear. I tried sharing my tale with friends, but the eye rolls and sure buddy expressions made me shut up. I never dared to hike alone again. Last summer, I decided to camp alone for the first time. The night was calm, crickets singing their lullabies, and the moon casting a gentle glow on the wilderness. I'm a nurse, so solitude didn't scare me, at least, not until the middle of that fateful night. Suddenly, the serene symphony of the forest was shattered by a gut-wrenching moan, the kind that sends shivers down your spine. Being in the medical field, my instincts kicked in. I thought someone might be injured or in pain. Without a second thought, I unzipped my tent and stepped into the cool night. The moans led me deeper into the woods, my flashlight cutting through the darkness like a beacon. Each step, a crunch on the forest floor. The cries for help grew louder, more desperate, guiding me like an eerie trail. And then I found her. A woman lying on the ground, bathed in the sickly glow of my flashlight. She seemed injured, yet there was an unsettling calmness about her. Her moans ceased as she fixed her gaze on me, and a chilling smile stretched across her face. Fear gripped me, and my first instinct was to scream. I turned and sprinted back towards my campsite, the woman's unsettling smile etched into my mind. Yet, even as I ran, the haunting moans persisted, following me like a ghostly echo through the trees. I stumbled back to the safety of my tent, hastily packing my belongings. The echo of her moans lingered, haunting the air. With adrenaline pumping, I made a beeline for my car, leaving the eerie forest behind. The memory of that night still sends a shiver down my spine. I don't know who or what I encountered in those woods, but one thing is for sure, I would never camp alone again. I was hiking alone in Colorado, and being young and reckless at that time, I wanted to challenge myself to get to the next shelter. The guide said it was 5 miles away, but in reality, it felt double that. I found myself caught in the dark, trying to follow the white paint marks on the rocks. The wind was howling, and I was starting to get scared that maybe I had missed the shelter since it had been so long. When I eventually made it to the shelter, only to find it was packed along with all the tent sites, so I had to go off the path to find a place to set up. And that's exactly what I did, setting up my tent in an area quite far from the shelter. I fell asleep after I lit some fire and took my dinner. I was already scared by the sounds of the winds and being alone there. But soon, my sleep was disrupted by what sounded like someone approaching my tent. I had a little sharp knife with me, which I pulled out. I unzipped my tent and popped my head out. Soon, I witnessed one of the scariest scenes I've ever had in my life. A huge man was sitting by the fire I had lit earlier. He had no shoes, no clothes. He looked really old, probably in his late 60s, but he looked fit. So it was clear to me that there's no way I could fight with him. Then he looked straight into my eyes. His eyes were bloodshot, and he smirked at me, stood up, and vanished into the woods. I remember being so terrified that he might come back, and God knows what he would do to me. I couldn't move and cried the whole night. In the early morning, I packed my stuff and sprinted to the next shelter. Till this day, I don't know who that man was, and if he was even a human or something else. The crisp autumn air hung in the small town like a lingering ghost as I decided to take a short hike to a local spot, leaving my husband back at the cozy inn where we were staying. He was down with a nasty flu, shivering under layers of blankets. With a promise to return soon, I ventured into the woods, guided by the rustling leaves and the whispers of nature. The trail, a familiar path etched into the landscape, wound through the trees like an old friend leading me to serenity. The small town, nestled between rolling hills, had that comforting charm that belied any hint of danger. Birds sang overhead, and the occasional squirrels scampered away as I strolled deeper into the woods, the path beneath my boots crackling with dried leaves. The sun dipped below the horizon sooner than I anticipated, casting long shadows that danced among the trees. The woods, once inviting, now seemed to breathe with an eerie stillness. My heart quickened, a subtle unease settling over me like a shadow refusing to be ignored. I dismissed it as an overactive imagination and continued, convincing myself that the darkness played tricks on my senses. A few miles in, the woods took on a dense, foreboding quality. The leaves on the trees above formed a thick canopy, blocking the moonlight and plunging the path into an inky blackness. I quickened my pace, the crunch of leaves beneath my feet, the only sound accompanying the rhythmic beat of my own footsteps. Then I felt it, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, a sixth sense alerting me to something amiss. I glanced over my shoulder, and there he was, a man in his late 50s, his eyes reflecting an unsettling intensity. Panic clutched at my chest as he maintained a steady distance. I stood there frozen, and I remembered seeing him early today in the same inn we checked. He was looking at us when we were taking our breakfast, and I thought he was just a weirdo. I realized that he was following me all the way around here, and God knows what he wants to do to me. Instinct took over. I bolted into the forest, my breath ragged and heart pounding. Trees blurred as I zigzagged between them, desperately trying to put distance between myself and the creepy man who was still following me. My phone vibrated in my pocket, and I fumbled to answer it. It was my husband, his voice a weak rasp through the line. I explained the situation, the urgency in my voice translating the fear I felt. Within minutes, my husband arrived, accompanied by a volunteering local who had pity on him since he was scared and sick. Returning to the inn, we approached the staff with a description of the man who had followed me. The staff exchanged uneasy glances. They denied any knowledge of a man staying there matching the same description I gave them. I felt a chill down my spine, the unease resurfacing. But one staff member said that he did, in fact, see a man fitting the description, but he was not a guest. He had merely stopped by for a meal in the restaurant and left. This was even creepier, as I remembered his creepy gaze at us in the same morning. Cops were called just to make sure he wouldn't attack anyone if he was still in the same area.